When the San Antonio Spurs traded for De'Aaron Fox, a trade deal between the Sacramento Kings and Chicago Bulls, the expectation was that this would be the Spurs point guard for the future, the star point guard that would be the ideal fit next to Victor Wembanyama, something the Spurs knew they would eventually need to address to realize and maximize Wemby's talents. But what we did not expect was that one, Stephon Castle would have a better than expected rookie season and demonstrate some real promise for the future and would go on to win Rookie of the Year, but two, and more importantly, no one would have thought the Spurs would get incredibly lucky in the draft lottery and move up to the number 2 pick in the draft, which they of course would use to select Dylan Harper out of Rutgers, who most believe to be a franchise game-changing player with his star-level potential. So going into this offseason, there were questions about what the Spurs would do now that they have 3 lead guards who are all good enough and deserve quality minutes. Would they look to maybe package Harper or Castle in a deal to land a really big name like a Giannis or Kevin Durant before he ultimately was traded to the Rockets? Or perhaps, given their good fortune of landing Dylan Harper, they would pivot and focus on his development as the lead guard for the future to pair alongside Wemby, and instead look to flip Fox in a trade given his age and the fact that he would be playing on an expiring contract this upcoming season, acquire more future assets to keep building around this young core. But instead, the Spurs did the opposite of that, and instead decided to give De'Aaron Fox a max contract extension to the tune of 4 years, $229 million, where they will be paying him max money through the age of 32. And while most have been saying, yeah, this is the right move for the Spurs, they had to lock him up after just trading away future assets to get him, I don't love this move for the Spurs. An organization that I think very highly of as a franchise that is synonymous with success, but extending Fox on a max contract, extending him early, I should say, is a bit of a head scratcher for me, and I'll explain why in this video. Also, guys, we are less than 2,000 subscribers away from 100K. I'm hoping to get to 100K by the end of the year. About 70% of you watching are not subscribed, so if you like the content, I would greatly appreciate it if you hit that sub button to help get to that goal. But anyway, back to the Spurs. Now, I know some are going to take this as disrespect to De'Aaron Fox, and that I would even question the Spurs giving him a 4-year max contract extension where he's going to be making over $55 million annually and roughly 30% of the cap, because I think Fox is a terrific player. He's a player with a killer instinct in crunch time. He knows how to punish you at the rim, and a player that is so hard to guard, especially when he gets downhill. And for a player like Fox, he absolutely deserves a big payday, a big contract extension. But I think most would agree De'Aaron Fox is not a top 15 player in the NBA. In fact, I'm sure most would say he's not a top 20 player in the NBA. And giving out max contracts nowadays in the NBA come with inherent risks in the apron era. We've seen countless times already where teams have regretted giving their max contracts or supermax contracts they've handed out to their players that have really hamstrung their ability to make moves on the margins after the fact. Like for me, Fox is one of those players in the league where a rookie max extension, which is 25% of the cap, is good value for said player, but it's a different story when you're paying them 30 or 35% of the cap after they finish out their rookie max extensions, where they haven't really developed into superstars. But all that aside, here is what I take issue with the Spurs' decision to extend Fox on a max deal, and that's really the timing of it. Fox just became eligible for an extension, but mind you, the Spurs did not have to extend him this offseason. Yes, he would have been going into the year on an expiring contract. Yes, there would have been looming questions about his impending free agency in 2026, which maybe could have impacted his play, but the Spurs could have extended him at any point during the season. This isn't a situation like a player on a rookie scale contract that is set to become a restricted free agent where they're up against a deadline to get a deal done before the start of the season. The Spurs at any point could have offered him an extension even after the trade deadline, and yes, even after the conclusion of the season before he hit unrestricted free agency on June 30th, where they could have still been able to retain him rather than letting him walk for nothing in free agency. Because let's be real, Fox did not look that great in his limited number of games he played with the Spurs. Now, yes, most of that was without Wemby, and Fox was sort of a one-man show, and at that point he was still playing through an injury which eventually sidelined him for the rest of the season. But if I'm the Spurs, what I saw is not enough to warrant a max contract extension before the season starts, especially when he's coming off a season-ending injury. I'm waiting to see how things go to start this season, seeing how he meshes with Wemby, because we really have no idea how that duo is going to look. And we don't have enough of a sample size to really say that they clearly fit perfectly together. And you got to pay Fox to lock him up and keep him around. But more importantly, if I'm the Spurs, I'm also saying we need to see how good Dylan Harper is. We need to see if he's the real deal. Is he the generational talent that people are making him out to be? Is he an up-and-coming superstar that is only 19 with loads of potential? What if he's the guy that we should be prioritizing? Does he fit our long-term plan better than Fox does? The Spurs have a whole season to assess and see what they had with all of these guards and see which ones made sense for them for the long haul. Now, they could still very well do that, and in fact, I'm sure that is going to be the case where they'll use this season to determine who they're going to move forward with, because I can't see a world where they're keeping all three of Fox, Harper, and Castle, since keeping all three means one of them is likely the odd man out in terms of getting minutes and development. But now, after giving Fox that 4-year max deal, it makes that contract exceedingly more difficult to move if they come to the determination that Harper and Castle are our guys. So let's flip Fox for some added value. Nah, you just tanked his trade value, giving a player of his caliber a max contract where he's going to be making close to 30% of the cap until he's 32 years old. Teams are going to be much more wary of trading for that contract under the new CBA, whereas teams would have been much more likely to pull the trigger on a deal for Fox as an expiring contract where they could control his next extension. So yeah, I don't like the timing of the extension for the Spurs when they could have afforded to wait and still controlled Fox's next deal to the point where they could have either traded him, or if he's not performing to the level they would expect of him, they could have been in a position to offer him a lesser contract below the max while still having the ability to offer more than other teams around the NBA. So yeah, I don't like the timing. I don't like the amount of it being a max contract. If they had agreed on a pretty team-friendly deal for a contract extension, an extension that would have been the requisite value for a player like Fox, that also gives them added flexibility when they inevitably have to play Wemby as well as the rest of this young core, unless they trade them, of course, then I would have been okay with all of it, and it would have made sense for the Spurs to put ink to paper now rather than dragging this out into the season. But a max contract, when Fox hasn't really proven much since joining the Spurs, is questionable to say the least, especially when we know that it's likely going to impact the development of the young guards in Harper and Castle, who have immense potential especially next to Wemby. And I know some have said, well, Castle and Harper are both 6'6", can't they just go with a 3-guard lineup where one plays the 3? Not if they can't shoot, which both Castle and Fox aren't really known for their shooting. Fox to an extent, yes, but his 3-point shooting has been very inconsistent throughout his career. And then Stephon Castle, if anything, one of the biggest weaknesses in the early stages of his career has been his shooting. Even Harper isn't known for being a lights-out shooter as well. So no, if they're going to go with a 3-guard lineup, one of those guys has to be a strong shooter to space the floor. So I don't see a scenario in which the Spurs could conceivably work out a 3-guard lineup of Fox, Harper, and Castle. The Spurs are eventually going to have to choose to let one go, but they made it that much more harder on themselves if Fox ends up being the one they want to move on from, with his new max contract being a potential deal breaker for teams wanting to make a trade. It's just my take on the matter. I would love to hear what you guys think though. You let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.